At about 8:50 this evening, General Noriega turned himself in to U.S. authorities in Panama with the full knowledge of the Panamanian government. He was taken to Howard Air Force Base in Panama, where he was arrested by DEA. A U.S. Air Force C-130 is now transporting General Noriega to Homestead Air Force Base, Florida. He will be arraigned in the U.S. District Court in Miami on charges stemming from his previous indictment for drug trafficking.
Торжественно клянусь верно служить народам нашей страны, строго следовать Конституции, гарантировать права и свободы граждан, добросовестно выполнять возложенные на меня высокие обязанности президента СССР.
The removal of Checkpoint Charlie represents a symbolic end to the physical divisions between East and West Berlin. But as an uncertain future unfolds, it signals the beginning of the hard work of actually reuniting the city.
You have served at this crossroad between East and West. You have done so loyally and with dedication. For the contribution you have made to the freedom in and the well-being of Berlin, you have earned the thanks of all free men.
In my opinion, I think what we're saying here is maybe the confrontational part of the Cold War is over.
And now I sign legislation which takes a sledgehammer to another wall, one which has for too many generations separated Americans with disabilities from the freedom they could glimpse but not grasp. And once again we rejoice as this barrier falls, proclaiming together, we will not accept, we will not excuse, we will not tolerate discrimination in America. Less than a week ago, in the early morning hours of August 2nd, Iraqi armed forces, without provocation or warning, invaded a peaceful Kuwait. Facing negligible resistance from its much smaller neighbor, Iraq's tanks stormed in blitzkrieg fashion through Kuwait in a few short hours. With more than 100,000 troops, along with tanks, artillery, and surface-to-surface missiles, Iraq now occupies Kuwait. At my direction, elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, as well as key units of the United States Air Force, are arriving today to take up defensive positions in Saudi Arabia. I took this action to assist the Saudi Arabian government in the defense of its homeland. Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined. Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met. Kuwait is once more in the hands of Kuwaitis in control of their own destiny. We share in their joy, a joy tempered only by our compassion for their ordeal. Tonight, the Kuwaiti flag once again flies above the capital of a free and sovereign nation.
Open conflict erupted in the 1980s, with anti-apartheid activists frequently shot at, beaten or arrested. Mass protests were firmly put down. But little by little, the apartheid establishment crumbled. After gradual reform, Nelson Mandela, imprisoned since not long after Sharpeville, was set free in 1990.
Generations of U.S. and Soviet negotiators, through their tireless efforts to carve out common ground from a thicket of contentious issues. And it represents a major step forward for our mutual security and the cause of world peace. And may I, too, thank everybody who worked on this treaty, really on both sides.
Repeating once again our top story, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has been removed from power, and there are tanks now in the streets of Moscow. Vice President Gennady Yanayev says he has taken over as acting president as the head of state of a special state committee.
Mingling with the rush hour traffic, Red Army armoured personnel carriers on the streets of Moscow this morning, heading to the Kremlin. They first moved in at 4 a.m., the first sign of the coup d'etat that removed Mikhail Gorbachev from power.
Freddie Mercury, the flamboyant frontman of the veteran British band Queen, died Sunday in his West London mansion. He died peacefully at age 45 of bronchopneumonia brought on by AIDS. Mercury had lived as a recluse the last 2 years and made no public appearances earlier this year to promote Queen's last album, Innuendo. His death came just 1 day after he issued a statement to the press confirming that he had AIDS, ending many months of rumor and denial.
President Gorbachev has resigned. The last president of the Soviet Union went on television to tell his people he had no regrets about the policies he had pursued and he would support the new Commonwealth.
We are standing by for an Oval Office address by President Bush, as he contributes to a day even historians may have trouble describing. A day when Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as the president of a Soviet Union which had already ceased to exist. The new power broker, Russian President Boris Yeltsin.
Good evening, and Merry Christmas to all Americans across our great country. During these last few months, you and I have witnessed one of the greatest dramas of the 20th century, the historic and revolutionary transformation of a totalitarian dictatorship, the Soviet Union, and the liberation of its peoples. As we celebrate Christmas, this day of peace and hope, I thought we should take just a few minutes to reflect on what these events mean for us as Americans. May God bless the people of the new nations in the Commonwealth of Independent States, and on this special day of peace on earth, goodwill toward men, may God continue to bless the United States of America. Good night. "34 years ago, President Eisenhower met in Geneva with Soviet leaders who proposed a plan called Open Skies, which would allow unarmed aircraft from the United States and the Soviet Union to fly over the territory of the other country. And as President Eisenhower put it, convince the world that we are lessening danger and relaxing tension. President Eisenhower's suggestion tested the Soviet readiness to open their society. And the Kremlin failed that test. Now, let us again explore that proposal but on a broader, more intrusive and radical basis, one which I hope would include allies on both sides.
Sarajevo Airport, the heart of the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. With Sarajevo ringed by Serbian forces, the only way in is a long, tortuous journey through the mountains. The rough tracks take the toll on the trucks, with regular stops for repairs. The Bosnian forces have few heavy weapons and can do little against the Serb artillery and mortars ranged against them from the airport and surrounding hills. In the past, it took the iron fist of communism to weld Yugoslavia's divided people together. Without a replacement, it seems more and more unlikely the historical divides here can be bridged. And with more than 70,000 already dead in this war, the hatred between the factions grows each day.
The case that shocked the world, and now it has exploded into a city out of control. The defendants being congratulated as the verdict, not guilty, rang through the packed courtroom over and over again. The 4 LAPD officers in the Rodney King beating case found not guilty on all counts except one. That announcement set off a firestorm of uncontrolled riots and violence that is still going on tonight. Angry demonstrators went on a rampage, taking control of the streets, and it's been an ugly, terrible situation all night long. Fires, looting, gunshots, random beating attacks, and now the National Guard may be ready to move in.
Despite numerous widespread pleas for calm, even before the verdicts came down this afternoon, people protesting the verdict in the King beating case turned parts of L.A. into a war zone late this afternoon and all night tonight. Rampaging protesters looted businesses in south central Los Angeles, setting dozens of fires, dragging people from their cars, and even in some cases firing on police.
Forgive me for interrupting. Ohio falls for Bill Clinton. According to our CBS News estimate, that's it. Game, set, match. It's over. We will have a new president of the United States. Bill Clinton will be the new president of the United States. Al Gore will be the new vice president of the United States. We estimate, look at the map now, everything in blue belongs to Bill Clinton. 286 electoral college votes at a rot-gut minimum. George Bush has 64 electoral votes so far. Still a long way to go. Florida and Texas among the many states still out, and there's 10 or 12 minutes before the polls close in Washington, Oregon, and California, among others. Clinton, Gore win. There will be a new president of the United States. Dan Rather, CBS.
Czechoslovakia grew out of the ruins of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of the First World War. It became part of the communist bloc after World War II. Years of communist rule did much to hide the differences in religion, wealth and culture between the Czech and Slovak peoples. 3 years ago, the communists stepped down. The people found new freedom, and the old differences were brought to the forefront. The Czech Republic flourished as new industry came in from the West, but the Slovaks remained relatively poor. In elections earlier this month, parties wanting independence were voted into power.
And we continue now our coverage of the terror that has struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Police say that it may in fact have been a bomb, a massive bomb, that caused an explosion to rip through the PATH train station below the trade centers just after noon today, sending shockwaves through the buildings where as many as 100,000 people were at work. The explosion has killed 4, that is the number at this hour, and it has injured more than 200. All day long, a steady stream of survivors emerged from 2 of the world's world's tallest buildings. But many, of course, are still trapped inside, and rescue crews say it may be hours before they are all evacuated.
The flames may be out, but a firestorm of controversy rages on after the assault on the Branch Davidian compound. Officials are starting to look for answers after doomsday in Waco. This morning, investigators began sifting through the embers of the Waco compound, searching for the bodies of more than 80 cult members believed killed in the fire. In Washington, President Clinton says he gives his full support to the decisions made by the Attorney General and the FBI to end the siege. But the family members of those killed in Waco have bitter words for those they say must bear the responsibility for needless death.
My fellow Americans, today I want to talk with you about our nation's military involvement in Somalia. This past weekend, we all reacted with anger and horror as an armed Somali gang desecrated the bodies of our American soldiers and displayed a captured American pilot. All of them soldiers who were taking part in an international effort to end the starvation of the Somali people themselves. These tragic events raise hard questions about our effort in Somalia.
Communism's last gasp, they were calling it, the attempt in October 1993 by a group of Russian opponents of President Boris Yeltsin to overthrow him by force. His answer on the 4th of that month was to send in the tanks to blast them out of their stronghold, the White House, Moscow's parliament building in the center of the city.
Hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of innocents have fled their homes, terrified of both sides in a civil war that became genocidal after the Rwandan president's plane was shot down a few weeks ago.
So every member of his family and all his village were killed, huh?
Abantu bose barapfuye. Muri serire cyari cyose. You know, a cell hagigira abantu bangahe. His family.
Yeah.
And then
all his broad family.
The village, even the village.
Yeah.
Yes, he's the only one who survived.
Out of how many? So how many was that to kill?
About 600.
About 600 dead?
Yeah.
In one village?
It took more than 6 years to bore the 3 tunnels that now link Folkestone in Kent to Calais on the French coast. 11 huge boring machines were used to cut through the chalk marl at a depth of up to 130 feet beneath the seabed. Laser alignment ensured the tunnels met successfully in the middle.
Both Nelson Mandela and South Africa had traveled a long way to get to this moment. More than 300 years of white domination ended for good with the swearing in of Nelson Mandela as this African nation's first black president. He was the most famous opponent of the brutal racist system of apartheid, imprisoned 27 years. Today, Mandela paid tribute to his new vice president, F.W. de Klerk, the last apartheid president who negotiated the historic transfer of power. Mandela then called for unity in this racially diverse and racially divided land.
Good evening. When he first took control of North Korea, Harry Truman was president of the United States. Today, there are reports that ordinary North Koreans were crying in the streets following word that President Kim Il-sung had died of a heart attack at the age of 82. The initial word of his death came over state-run television. The announcer struggled to continue while reading the official statement. He was in control for 46 years and was called Great Leader. He was the longest-serving communist dictator in world history.
A massive car bomb exploded outside of a large federal building in downtown Oklahoma City, shattering that building, killing children, killing federal employees, military men, and civilians.
The chaos in downtown Oklahoma City did indeed resemble Beirut after what police believe to be a 1,200-pound car bomb ripped through the 9-story federal building shortly after 9 o'clock this morning. More than 500 were already in their offices, and at least 50 children were in a daycare center on the second floor.
Bombing in Oklahoma City was an attack on innocent children and defenseless citizens. It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil. The United States will not tolerate it, and I will not allow the people of this country to be intimidated.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in count 2 of the information.
The presidents of Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia have reached a peace agreement to end the war in Bosnia, to end the worst conflict in Europe since World War II. After nearly 4 years of 250,000 people killed, 2 million refugees, atrocities that have appalled people all over the world, the people of Bosnia finally have a chance to turn from the horror of war to the promise of peace. The presidents of Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia have made a historic and heroic choice. They have heeded the will of their people. Whatever their ethnic group, the overwhelming majority of Bosnia's citizens and the citizens of Croatia and Serbia want the same thing. They want to stop the slaughter. They want to put an end to the violence and war. Today, thank God, the voices of those people have been heard.
Her name is Dolly. 7 months old, she may not be the monster imagined in a science fiction fantasy, yet the cuddly Finn Dorset lamb may represent a major landmark in the history of genetic engineering. On an ordinary farm in Scotland, scientists say a clone was created from a single cell taken from the udder of a sheep. The embryo was then implanted in a surrogate, making an exact genetic copy of its so-called mother. Scientists hail it as a triumph for research in aging, medicine, and genetics.
Over the years, federal investigators have tried to recreate both the bombing suspect's appearance and his work. Over the years, nearly 18 years now, handcrafted bombs have periodically turned up in places mostly linked to high technology. Early targets involved mostly people working for universities or airlines, which prompted the FBI to codename the case Unabomb. In December 1985, a device outside a Sacramento, California computer store killed the owner when he picked it up. 2 years later, somebody got a look at a man who left an explosive outside a computer store in Salt Lake City. That description and the features in the FBI sketch are now more than 9 years old. The FBI has linked that single suspect to nearly 24 incidents around the country. Most of them hurt people. 3 times now, the victims have died.
We have more for you now on the crash of that TWA Flight 800, a 747 bound from JFK Airport to Charles de Gaulle in Paris. Around 8:30 this evening, that aircraft plunged out of the sky and crashed 10 miles south of Mauritius Inlet in East Mauritius off the south shore of Long Island. We have now Jill Saltzman on the telephone. Jill, tell me where you are. You saw something out there, didn't you?
Yes, we were on Rogers Beach in West Hampton Beach, barbecuing with our children, and the kids were down by the ocean. And we saw a white light in the sky, and we just noticed the light, and all of a sudden we look up and see a red flash of fire, like we couldn't believe, come down into the ocean. And my children were by the shoreline, and they felt like a shock going through their bodies, like a gigantic explosion. They came running back up to us. We're absolutely hysterical, and we couldn't imagine what it was.
An explosion rocked through the city of Atlanta at approximately 1:20 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday morning. It was in the Olympic Park, Centennial Olympic Park. There are very sketchy details, even hours after the explosion, as to the cause of it and the extent of injuries and potential fatalities. We know that a rock concert was taking place. We know that there has been talk about an explosion from a garbage can. There's been talk that there was evacuation in the moments before it. There's been talk about potentially a transponder having exploded. So obviously there has been lots of talk, but nothing definitive. Chaos at the scene at that point. We don't expect too many details to be available until sometime much later on.
You have declared a jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
The U.S. government has committed acts that are extremely unjust, hideous, and criminal through its support of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And we believe the U.S. is directly responsible for those killed in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq.
Is the jihad directed against the U.S. government or United States troops in Arabia? What about U.S. civilians in Arabia or the people of the United States?
We have focused our declaration of jihad on striking at the U.S. soldiers inside Arabia, the country of the 2 holy places, Mecca and Medina. In our religion, it is not permissible for any non-Muslim to stay in Arabia.
Rapper and actor Tupac Shakur is dead at the age of 25, just about a week after sustaining 4 bullet wounds last Saturday night in Las Vegas. Shakur spent the weekend in the hospital on a respirator in critical condition. Shakur was shot 4 times after leaving the Mike Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas in a car driven by Marion Suge Knight, the head of his label, Death Row Records. The shots were fired from a Cadillac that drove up alongside Knight's BMW, but police still have no leads on a suspect or motive. Tupac had been on a respirator in the hospital and had 1 lung removed.
Now, this is the gunman. He's crouching. He starts to walk away almost nonchalantly, but look at him with his AK-47. Now he's starting to open up. Police, he's firing at police who are across the street in a parking lot. Now, he's walking. This is what makes me think he had body armor on, because this is a guy who is almost nonchalant in the way he's walking around in that parking lot.
And sort of indiscriminate firing.
A clip full of bullets. He just sets down. Now he's changing. Another clip, pulls it out of what looks like an ammunition pack, puts another clip in there, and he's getting ready to do the same thing over again. Now you see the white car? The white car is the getaway car.
Here is another pack over in the handicap parking in the bank. We don't know what was in there, but he comes out shooting.
Oh my God! They killed Kenny! You bastard!
Here's the Anti-South Park League. We've come up with yet another reason why South Park should be banned. Reason number 459. When played backwards, Kenny's dialogue is satanic. Here's some of Kenny's dialogue now. And now, when played backwards, you can almost make out satanic messages. Listen carefully.
I am Satan. Love me.
Aha! Did you hear that? JIQ, South Park. That's one more reason not to watch.
Watch South Park every Wednesday night at 10, only in Comedy Central.
Confirmation from our very own Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, who's in the Far East at the moment, that Diana, Princess of Wales, has in fact been killed in that car accident in Paris just a few hours ago. There had been extreme concern that Diana was very seriously injured when she was taken from the wreckage. There was a news blackout to all intents and purposes for a significant amount of time. Confirmation from the Interior Minister from Paris for a short time, and now there is confirmation that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died. She died at 4 a.m. after going into cardiac arrest. That, according to doctors at the hospital in Paris, Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead.
Potentially damaging cloud is hanging over the White House this morning. CNN has confirmed that Whitewater Counsel Kenneth Starr has been granted permission to expand his investigation. He will be looking into new allegations that President Clinton had an affair with a former White House intern and then urged her to lie about it. CNN White House correspondent John King is following the story, and he joins us now from the White House. John?
Well, Donna, what began as a search for evidence in the Paula Jones sexual harassment case has mushroomed into another investigation of the president and his personal conduct. Now, sources tell CNN that independent counsel Kenneth Starr is investigating whether the president and his confidant, Washington lobbyist Merton Jordan, asked a former White House intern to lie about a relationship she says, or at least alleges to have, with the president. Now, at issue is whether the intern had a sexual relationship with the president, something the Jones team wants to prove as part of its sexual harassment case.
The establishment of the ICC is above all a triumph of the universal value of justice, which is shared by all peoples of the world.
This is, of course, a very sad day for the State Department, and throughout the United States government. We feel very deeply about the loss of our colleagues whose names will be added to the plaque of Foreign Service officers and State Department employees and U.S. diplomats who have given their lives in the service of our country in the 200-plus years of American diplomacy. And we also feel deeply the loss of our Foreign Service nationals in our 2 posts in East Africa, and to the Kenyans and Tanzanians who lost their lives in these tragic bombings.
A massive car bomb in Northern Ireland has killed more than 20 people, including children. It exploded in a busy shopping street in Omagh, County Tyrone. About 100 people have been injured. It's the worst bomb attack in 30 years of terrorism in the province. Police had been evacuating roads around the courthouse after a telephone warning, but the bomb went off several hundred yards away in an area people were being sent towards.
Our mission is clear: to demonstrate the seriousness of NATO's purpose so that the Serbian leaders understand the imperative of reversing course. to deter an even bloodier offensive against innocent civilians in Kosovo, and if necessary, to seriously damage the Serbian military's capacity to harm the people of Kosovo. In short, if President Milosevic will not make peace, we will limit his ability to make war.
The investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous. The two gunmen who went on the rampage booby-trapped the building and even themselves. All day long, investigators have searched the homes of both teenage killers. In one of them, police say they found bomb-making materials. Specially trained officers searching the school today found close to 30 explosive devices all around the building. Authorities have also revised the death toll, now saying 15 people were killed, including the two gunmen. Most of the bodies are still inside the school, but families of the murder victims have been notified.
Divers today found the bodies of John Kennedy, his wife, and her sister in the wreckage of his plane at the bottom of the ocean off Martha's Vineyard. In a day of fast-breaking developments, recovery teams got to work retrieving remains and wreckage. A memorial mass was set for Friday in New York. The President and the First Lady will be there. And the Kennedy family made plans for a possible burial at sea.
Дорогие друзья, дорогие мои, сегодня я в последний раз обращаюсь к вам с новогодним приветствием. Но это не все. Сегодня я в последний раз обращаюсь к вам как президент России.
It is clear that because the difficulty is as far-flung as the billions of microchips that run everything from farm equipment to VCRs, this is not a challenge that is susceptible to a single government program or an easy fix. It is a complex test that requires us all to work together. Every government agency, every university, every hospital, every business, large and small.